Hello, my love. Welcome to another episode of Blisstopia podcast. I am your host, Mercedes Castellani, and I am so grateful that we will be recording this episode today. You know how important meditation has been for me, how important spirituality has been for me, how much we've been talking about spirituality, meditation in this podcast. And today we have a guest who is a deep embodiment of this message. Our guest today is Juan Pablo Real. Juan Pablo has been a Buddhist monk for 8 years. He's originally from Colombia and he decided to travel to Asia back in 2013. And there he learned about meditation and then eventually he became a Buddhist monk. He has been learning Buddhism in several countries such as Thailand, Myanmar, Taiwan, Sri Lanka, and India. He left the monastic order earlier this year, and now he's back in Colombia, sharing the profound teachings and insights that he gained during this time as a monk. It is a deep honor to have such a wise guest with us today, such a deep embodiment of the teachings of Buddhism. So I'm really, really excited and really honored to have you, Juan Pablo, in Blisstopia today. Welcome to the show.
So much, Mercedes, for the invitation, and I'm so happy to be here sharing with you all. Thank you.
We are so happy. We have so much to learn from your experience, from the things that you've lived as a monk. So why don't we start? I always like to start by the very beginning, you understanding who you are, even though this is a tricky question, as we will probably talk later on. But if you had to summarize your story and what led you to becoming a monk, what would you share with us?
Well, it was really unexpected. It all started with the practice of meditation. I was really wanting to learn about meditation, to gain some access to meditative practice. And I had the opportunity to attend a 10-day retreat. And back, it was like in 2011. And in that retreat, I can say it was life changing. There was an insight, there was a peace I felt at that time that it, it, I felt this is what I was looking for. And from then on, I just started to get more involved, wanting to learn more, which eventually led me to Asia. And to my surprise, because actually I was going to Asia just for a few months, but to my surprise, I got the opportunity to meet great teachers, and they were a source of inspiration for me. And being under their presence and practicing under their guidance, it just felt this is what I really want to do. This is resonate with. So I decided it was a gradual process. It's not that I arrived in Asia and I became a monk. It was a gradual process. I was practicing, I was studying, I was meeting monks. I met people whom gain inspiration from. And that was, I think, the most important thing, like the inspiration I got from others, which led me to say, okay, I want to try as a monk. I want to try this training as a monastic. And so I got the opportunity to ordain.
Amazing. And what made you choose Buddhism amongst any other, maybe trains of thoughts, philosophies? This is not a religion, it's a philosophy. So what made you choose Buddhism instead of other ways of reaching, spirituality and reaching maybe peace, contentment, some of the things that we deeply seek as human beings? Why Buddhism?
I mean, I didn't have prior experience with other practices. So I just got into this meditation retreat. I felt the benefit. It was so profound. And I wasn't even really I wasn't really aware that it was about Buddhism because the way it was presented was just a teaching to cultivate the mind, to purify the mind, and and the results were so powerful in my life that I wanted to keep learning about it, which eventually led me to understand that this came from the Buddha's teaching himself. So that's, I can say that's what led me to Buddhism. It was not like I had a lot of knowledge about other traditions, what they teach. I just got into this and I was seeing the benefit, but something I can say for sure, it was the practice. It's not philosophy, it's not what I read, it's not what people told me about it. It was the practice, the things I realized through practice, which led me to understand that this is beneficial for me.
Hmm.
This is what I was looking for in my life. And that's what had me walking this path.
Mm.
for several years now.
Amazing. And I deeply resonate with what you say, that it's kind of this gradual path. Of course, I didn't go as far as you went, but for me, it was
Hmm.
kind of the same. I started meditating. I came back from work. I was very stressed. And I came one day home and I said, I'm just going to meditate. I don't know where it came from. Maybe I saw an ad or something for a meditation app. And I was like, I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes. And I had never done it, zero experience. And I just sat there for 20 minutes and I just felt like I was back home finally. Like I
Hmm.
had been
Hmm.
somewhere else all along and I was finally there with myself, feeling peaceful, feeling content. And I started practicing. Every time I had 20 minutes, I would sit and meditate. And eventually, I started reading about what was behind meditation. So I started reading about Buddhism. And eventually, I went to Thailand only for 2 days. I did a meditation retreat, a silent retreat. Doesn't compare at all to your experiences, but I can understand how it can be a gradual process
Hmm.
and how we can feel like we're finally home somehow. And it feels so right in our bones. We don't know why, but there's something that clicks, there's something that works, there's something that makes us feel finally peaceful and at home.
I think that's what you're saying is key, like finding that home inside ourselves. Because generally we're looking outside. We're trying to look for comfort, to try to find happiness outside. And it is when we realize that there is something inside that which brings a lot of peace and happiness that changes everything, changes our view of life because it's
Mm,
not outside what we're looking for, it's actually inside. And how can we develop this? So
mm,
I resonate as well with what you're saying because this is what actually had me meditate for all these years and go through all the hardships one has to go as a monk and practicing long term intensive retreats in Asia is not easy, but
mm,
it's that conviction that what you're doing is actually helping you in many levels. It's not
mm.
just finding yourself, it's not finding deeper truths, but also the way you resonate with the world, how you interact with the world changes as well.
So beautiful, so beautiful. So you touched on happiness very briefly, and I'm curious about how this deep experience that you had changed your definition of happiness. So, how did you define happiness before you became a monk, and how do you define happiness now after this 8 years experience in Asia?
Yes, it's actually an interesting question because, and I think somehow we all can relate in a way with this. Before, I was looking for happiness outside. I was trying to find happiness through gratification of the senses, good food, good sights, good sounds, good smells, good experiences, traveling, meeting people, and all sorts of things based on the senses and externally. So basically my life was how can I get more of these things in my life and how can I put aside what is not pleasant, what I don't like, what are negative experiences somehow. But through the practice, I came face to face to this pursuit of happiness. And then I found, because I was in a monastery in silence, meditating 12 hours a day, not being able to communicate with anyone, just in your room, meditating intensively, and then I realized I couldn't satisfy these pleasures. I couldn't eat what I wanted to eat. I couldn't see what I wanted to see. I couldn't listen to what I wanted to listen. I couldn't do any of the things I wanted to do, and I was suffering deeply because the mind was just projecting itself outwardly, trying to reach for these pleasures, but I couldn't because I was just in my room meditating in silence. Then this was revealing because at some point it was crushing because the mind is just keeps bombarding you with thoughts like I want this, I want that, remembering when I had this, when I had that, once I'm outside I will be going for this, I will be going there, I will be doing this and that, but I was just there in silence meditating. And there was like a breakthrough at some point where I realized, okay, either I focus on my meditation or I go crazy, because there are only two ways I see here. And it was true. I say, okay, I'm meditating. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going for this. And at that point, I realized that the mind started to calm down and start to get away from all this. I started to push away all these thoughts, all these cravings, all these desires, and I was feeling content, at ease, just like joyful. It was just simple. I was content with my present, and then it clicked at that point and say, okay, this is very important because it's the mind actually what makes the difference between happiness and unhappiness, how we relate to the world, how we relate to the experiences we're having. And are we looking at the world through the lens of craving, desires, trying to satisfy all our needs, our cravings, and rejecting everything that we don't like, that is unpleasant? Or are we accepting reality the way it unfolds? And at that point, because I was meditating and I committed myself to this meditation, I said, okay, I'm just going to meditate. But to my surprise, I became at ease during this period. I gained a type of happiness I never experienced before, which was a type of happiness born from inside out of contentment. Just whatever I had, it was okay. I
Mm.
didn't need good food. I didn't need this. The weather was awful because it was so hot, but I was at ease. So I think this is one of the main things. This is the most important thing that changed regarding happiness. That before it was craving based, trying to
Mm.
satisfy all the desires, and now it's more like understanding and accepting reality the way it unfolds. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. We all have problems. At some point, we'll go through difficulties. At some point, we will not be able to eat what we want to eat. We will not be able to go where we want to go. So, how do we react on this? Do we take it? Do we face these circumstances? And this practice really helps you to accept and to accept the experience the way it's unfolding, not fighting against it, and just try to understand how it is manifesting in the mind. Of course, we are facing a situation, but the mind is bombarding us with thoughts, maybe aversion, maybe wanting some other things. Then we start to understand these patterns in the mind, and we have tools to cool them down and to say, okay, this is not the moment. Let's cool this down. I'm not getting anxious. I'm not getting angry. I'm not getting whatever. Just accept the way it is. And then we understand like everything changes, It's not nothing, no experience is permanent. All experiences come and go. So we also develop patience. So
Mm.
I think this is a way that profoundly changed the way I see happiness.
So beautiful, so beautiful. And I think it sets also the by losing control of what's happening externally, we regain control of ourselves. We are kind of letting go of things that are externally, and we can gain a sense of control of our own inner worlds, or at least observance of our own inner worlds. It's not
Mhm.
even about control, it's about observing what's happening. So I'm really curious about what was this experience as a monk like? How does it work? I mean, you went to Asia, and is it feasible for anybody to become a monk? How is this experience like?
Okay, so I mean, in theory, everyone can become a monk and a nun. It's just one of the main things is finding a good teacher, because the teacher becomes like your father, the person who takes care of you. So it's super important to find a person one feels respect for, one feels inspiration from. And once one has found this teacher, then one can ask, right, in this case, the teacher has to be a monk, and one can request, like, I would like to become a monk, and they would accept you generally, especially for Westerners or foreigners. They're happy to see people traveling from far away to come to their country to practice the Buddhist teaching, and then to take it one step further and becoming a monk or a nun. So they're very supportive, and they provide all this the support necessary, because when one becomes a monk or a nun, one renounces to everything. You
Mm.
let go of your old personality. It doesn't matter who you were. It doesn't matter how rich you were, how well educated you were, which family you come from. None of this matters. You come there, you shave your head, you wear the robe, you are exactly the same as anyone else in the monk,
Mm.
in the community. So in a way, it's renouncing of one's ego, one's construction of who I think I am. It's just letting go of this and just entering this order. So they're very supportive because it's not easy, of course. There are many struggles at the beginning. There are many things to learn, of course. Becoming a monk is more like it's a training. It's not a religious commitment one makes with a monk or with the Buddha or any deity or anything. It's more like a commitment with oneself, and it's saying, okay, I want to train in this way. So one undertakes the training of a monk, and one lives by the rules of monks. One of them is just renouncing to money, for example. We weren't allowed to touch money. So we weren't allowed to keep food, to cook, so many things. So that's part of the training. And the whole of the training aims at renunciation, letting go, like just dispelling all these layers, all this construction we've made of ourselves, who I think I am, what I think are my needs, and just letting go of this and then finding away in a completely different setting and finding, okay, there is also this possibility, and this possibility also brings me joy because I don't need to worry about possessions, I don't need to worry about money, I don't need to worry about looks, I don't need to worry about social interactions. And then one also realizes like the happiness that comes from this simple life.
So beautiful. You're describing this, and I get this sense of freedom and peace, because we don't need to be,
Hmm.
taking care of so many things, taking care of a certain image, taking care of an identity that it's so heavy because we've crafted a certain
Hmm.
identity our whole lives. And then we feel like we can't escape it. And here it's the opportunity to escape from all the stories that we've been telling ourselves, the stories that we like, and also the stories that make us suffer. So this is the
Hmm.
opportunity to have clean slate, start from scratch, and just get stripped away from everything, but at the same time realizing that you're free and you don't need anything to begin with. And there's such
Hmm.
true deep freedom in that.
There
So
was an
beautiful.
instance in Taiwan, and I was in a monastery in Taipei, and some monks who were walking around the island, just without no schedule. They were just walking, and their purpose was just walking around the whole of the country. And they came to the monastery I was at, and so we started to walk. I said, okay, we're gonna have some time, let's walk. And this, at some point during this time, while walking with them, I had no destination. I was just following them, and then I realized how free it was, this life where you don't know where you're going to spend your night at, but you don't care.
Mm,
You know, it's you don't worry where you're going to spend your night at because you have your tent. You find a good spot, set your tent, and then you spend the night. Next day, you go with your bowl. People give you food, and that's it. You don't need to worry, and then you can stop wherever you want, go wherever you want, without time constraints, nothing. And then I felt, wow, this is in a way like mundane freedom because I can do whatever I want with my time. I mean, I decided to do this and I can do it, and I can just go without having to worry about many of the things that concerns us, where I'm going to eat, when am I going to sleep, what's going to happen to me, not thinking because the worry as well. It's also free from worry because when we
mhm,
have this worry, what I'm going to do, what if something happens, we're not at ease.
mhm.
But while walking with them, I realized that I was not worrying about this. I just put aside all these worries, and it just brought me a sense of freedom. And then I realized this is so beautiful. This is so beautiful about monastic life. It allows us to do this type of things.
So beautiful. So beautiful. I think it's one of the most beautiful gifts we can give to ourselves as humans, to try that level of freedom and that level of
Hmm.
peace, which I think deep down is what we're all seeking. So, could you explain to us? I know this could be a very, very long answer, but if you had to summarize the essence of Buddhism, some of
Hmm.
the most important teachings, what would you take out of all the things that, of course, we can learn from Buddhism, but some ideas that you think are fundamental in Buddhism?
At the core, the essence is the thorough understanding of suffering, why we suffer, and how to overcome this suffering. Is the realization that there is inherent suffering in life, pain, aging, sickness, death, separation with beloved ones, association with what we don't want and find unpleasing, and so on. It doesn't mean that the life is suffering, like it's just, oh, life is suffering. No, but we cannot also deny that there is an underlying current of dissatisfaction, of displeasure, in a way, suffering in life. And so the Buddha's teaching encourages us to look deep, not to run away from this suffering, not to try to find comfort in the senses, trying to accumulate wealth, trying to live as many experiences as possible, trying to do things, but instead, how to look at this dissatisfaction, this displease, this suffering, how to understand it thoroughly, and then how to overcome it. So based on this principle, it comes the another key aspect, which is the whole of the teaching is a training for cultivating the mind, how to make the mind beautiful, how to understand all the hindrances, all the weeds that are in the mind, and how to take them away, uproot all these weeds, and instead plant beautiful things and cultivate in this way the mind. So we can say it's twofold. So in a way, it's understanding the inherent suffering in life, in existence, understand it thoroughly, and cultivate the mind towards achieving the state of bliss and ultimate happiness, which is what the Buddha taught, which in Sanskrit they call nirvana. So, but it's a practice. It's not as much a philosophy. It's not about. That's why sometimes thinking about, oh, some people read about Buddhism and think, oh, the Buddha says life is suffering. It's not like that. One has to understand the context in which that was said, and then understand that the whole of it's a practice. Without practicing, it's impossible to understand the teaching.
Hmm.
Without cultivating the mind, without bringing forth all these good qualities that lie in the mind, in the heart, and also understanding all the hindrances, all the weeds that are also there that are preventing us from being happy. So this is key as well, because if we don't see this, if we don't understand this, and if we don't remove this thing, we're going to face the same obstacles over and over and over again. Whereas if we get rid of them, let's say if we uproot all these weeds and start to cultivate things like compassion, kindness, generosity, wisdom, concentration, and so on, then we start to see how the life itself starts to change. And then we start to see, okay, this is working. This is actually leading me to more and more happiness, to more clarity, to more wisdom, not only for myself, but also the way I relate to the world is also changing. The way experiences happen is also changing because my relationship with reality has changed. And then we understand that, yeah, I, this is bringing me happiness, a different type of happiness. So I would say, in essence, this is what the Buddha what he taught, and what the Buddha's teaching is about understanding these things and overcoming them.
So beautiful. And also, from what I understood, there's a lot of non attachment. So, when we say cultivating the mind, also cultivating the mind to avoid attachments. Can you explain a little bit more what that is and how we can do it? Because sometimes we do get attached to people that we love, identities, certain situations. So, what is it really, and how can we overcome some of those deepest attachments that a human could experience?
Well, I wish it was this easy to say it like a formula. Okay, this is the way to do it. It's a process. The way we talked before. It's a process. It's a process of understanding. So we start to see how attachments operate in our lives, how we're clinging toward certain things, let's say material things, how we're so attached we cannot let go. So much so that whenever we see that these possessions are in danger, we try to control everything around us in order to protect that. So we don't want it to change. We want to keep this, for example, stability. And then we have this stability, and then we worry, what's going to happen in 1 year? What if I lose everything that I have acquired so far? And then we're not even not enjoying what we have in the present, but we're also trying to manipulate reality, trying to control everything in order to have whatever we want. And this is, I think, one of the main attachments is attachment to our own desires. And of course, it leads to suffering in a way. It's inevitable because even if we see it in the larger perspective, eventually we're going to die. We all are going to pass away. So no matter what possessions, everything has to let go of everything. So we cannot keep things forever. It's impossible. But somehow we think we want to keep them forever. That nothing is enough. So it brings a lot of stress and suffering. So that's why the Buddha tackles this issue to trying to how do we understand attachments? The thing is like attachments arise in the mind. What is our relationship with the object we are attached to? Let's say even a teaching, you can get attached to the Buddha's teaching as well, and to cling to them and to not let go of them. So that's why it's very important to first understand how attachment operates in the mind and being very honest because we know when something is giving us joy, ease, and when something's making us worried and stressed, and when we're causing harm or when we're helping others. These things are very clear, but we just need to be like really honest to ourselves. So the whole path of non-attachment starts like in Buddhism. Actually, it starts in a beautiful way. It starts through the practice of generosity. And it's one of the first trainings the Buddha recommends to people who starts to walk in the path of his teaching. It's about generosity, giving without attachments. Why? Because when we have some possession, something, anything, and we cannot share it with others, let's say food. I have some chocolates and someone's coming to visit and I don't want to share my chocolates because they're so special. They were brought from, let's say, Switzerland, super special, and they're just unique and I don't want to. So I have attachment towards these chocolates. I want to enjoy them just myself. So I don't want to share with anyone. So there is clinging there. There is attachment to this, which prevents me to share to others. So that's why generosity is the first one of the first principles, because we understand, we see this. I, I'm getting controlled by these chocolates. You know, they're controlling me because I'm just trying to manipulate things. Maybe I hide them or do whatever necessary to keep my chocolate. So they're controlling me in a way. So we understand this, and then we say, okay, they are not going to control me. So I share. Okay. Sometimes at the beginning it might be difficult depending on the level of attachment, but we see over time as we do it more and more and more that it actually brings happiness. Sharing brings happiness, not only for ourselves, but also for other people. And I used to do an exercise with friends sometimes that I asked them to recollect that period in their life when they shared selflessly, like they out of their heart or they wanted to share something, and also to remember a situation where someone didn't share something that person could share with them, and just to think how did you feel in those two instances. And everybody said the same thing. When no one shared with them or that time, they felt unease, they felt bad in a way, they felt some sort of grief, let's call it. Whereas when they could share with others, they felt openness, expansion, they felt joy. Even if that happened several years ago, they still experience the joy of having shared with someone. So I tell them, imagine if a person does this consistently on a daily basis, cultivates these mental states on a daily basis, generosity, expansion, openness, sharing with others. I can assure you, in a few days, weeks, you will see the benefits in yourself and people around you will see the benefits. And also reality will change as well. Because on the other side, if we are attached, we don't want to share, we try to hold onto everything and control and manipulate reality or even people in order to keep the things we want for ourselves, the way we want them for ourselves.
Mm.
Even if it brings suffering to other people. Sometimes we lie, sometimes we cheat, sometimes we do so many things in order to get what we want, regardless of the consequences. But then we look backwards, years back, and then we know. we feel bad about it. It's not that we feel happy, like we cheated or we lied or we did this sort of things. So this is unhappiness. And it's an accumulation of actions which bring unhappiness. So overall, if we take this, the accumulation, one leads toward unhappiness and the other leads toward happiness. So I think this maybe I went like sideways, but I think this tackles what is attachment and the suffering it brings, and how can we start to let go of these attachments.
Absolutely. And you explain it in a very, very clear way. And I think that's, what you said about the chocolate. It's, it seems there's that level, and that an object can already control us. And then there's
Mhm.
many other things that we give our power away to. And then there's this deeper layer. First, we can try to master that one, which is not easy, of course, and try to let go of some objects that control us. And then there are also even deeper layers of I have an identity that is now controlling me because I'm the doctor and this is what I should be doing, or I'm the blah, 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 and this is what I should be doing. And then there's even deeper layers of how can we non attach to people that we deeply, deeply, deeply love. So, what would you say in those regards, in the regards to the identity and in regards to, for example, and the Buddhist teachings speak a lot about this. What if we have someone who is sick or is about to die, and we deeply love these people, and we are forced to practice this non-attachment in those situations, or in general, even if they're healthy, but we know we're all going to end up in the same place. How can we let go the people that we love the most?
That's difficult. In a way, the way love is expressed, like in Buddhism and even in Christianity, actually, I was having conversations with some Christians. It's true love is flows outwardly, gives without expectations, just flows. And true love, let's say, wants the best for the other person, whether that person is with us or away from us. It's like selfless love, which brings me to the point sometimes love, what we consider love, sometimes it's embedded with attachment. We want the company, we want this person represents this for me, this person gives me this, so many layers. This person makes me feel stable, secure, and of course there is love, but there are so many other things that are
Mm,
embedded into this love, and we get attached to those things. That's the problem.
mm.
And then we confuse them for love. We think this is love, but it's a cluster, it's a clump of
Cluster
things.
of attachment. It's
It,
20% love, 80% attachment.
sometimes that's the case. Unfortunately, sometimes that's the case. Sometimes we use reflection to understand this and try to identify these things. And that's why I mentioned before, one has to be very honest with oneself and face oneself, even in the darkest parts of one's own mind. Because sometimes we are afraid to face these things, and we try to
Mm,
push them away
mm,
and think that they don't exist. But we have to face them and we have to see, oh, actually, this wasn't love. This was just like physical attachment. I was attached to the sensual pleasure this person brought to my life. Of course, there is some care, there are some things, of course, but if we sometimes we are so honest, we can get to see this thing. And it doesn't mean it's bad, but it's very important to first being able to face this thing. So once we start to see this thing, we also start to understand what's love within this relationship. And we start to cultivate this part we call love, like giving selflessly to helping the other person, being patient, being supportive, wanting really the best for that person, wanting that person to be happy no matter where that person is. If the person is truly happy, one rejoices in this happiness. Because sometimes, okay, we want this person to be happy, but she or he has to be with me, not
mm,
with other person. So
mm,
if she or he is with another person, then no, maybe I don't wish her to be or him to be happy just when
mm,
she is with me. So it's very important. And also with beloved ones, this is a tough one because eventually we will see our loved ones pass away. Let's say parents, relatives, our siblings, or maybe we die first. They will have to experience that.
Mm,
If they die first, we will experience that. There is no, as I said, there is no formula. But one has something very important, and this is something that contemplation I do every time someone passes away. This is this cycle of life.
mm,
We're bound to die. There is nothing we can do. Separation is inevitable. Eventually will come. Either now, in 1 month, in 10 years, 20 years, but it will come. So I think when we reflect often in this impermanence, when we see our beloved ones and we understand, let's say my father or my mom, understand she's now with me. Eventually, she won't be here. Any of us is going to pass away at some point. And it's not about being pessimistic, it's understanding that this is something inevitable, which brings us to something very important. How do we spend our time when we have the opportunity to spend our time together? Because the time we're spending is the, who knows, it might be the only time we can spend together. Because that's also the other thing. Sometimes we're with a person and we're not really with the person, we're not really truly fully enjoying with the person, sharing with the person, but we're just projecting things.
mm,
We live in the mind, trying to project things, plans and daydreaming, and we're not really with the person. We're not patient. We don't accept the person, or we want the person to change to be another person other than the person, what the person is, who the person is. So when we start to understand this impermanence and that everything is temporary, it helps us to get grounded in the present moment and to live more fully the present moment. Of course, it doesn't mean it's not going to hurt when they're not there anymore. But I can assure you, if a person practices this consistently throughout his or her life, when separation comes, one of the first thoughts that will come to mind is it was inevitable. It had to happen at some point. It's happening now. And it helps. It helps to soothe all the emotions that can arise when there is separation. Because we understand. For example, if something inevitable like death, we understand there's nothing we can do. And actually, we reflect, we had the same reflection upon ourselves. I'm also going to pass away eventually. This body is also impermanent. So it helps to dislodge the grip of attachment that we have towards the world
mm.
itself, because we understand and we start to understand. The more we do it, we start to understand everything is impermanent. Possessions are impermanent. Economic conditions are impermanent. Political conditions are impermanent. Friends come and go. People come and go, relationships come and go, health, sometimes we're healthy, sometimes we're not healthy. Youth, it it comes and it also lives. We get
Mm.
old. No matter what we do, no matter how much we fight reality, we're getting old. We start to accept this and it's difficult. But if one's really honest, it's okay, this is inevitable. Calm down. And one has a different way of processing it, not with so much attachment but with understanding and acceptance. I think
Yes,
this is one way to tackle this.
absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that in such beautiful words and such depth. And I think that's also part of what Buddhism brings to the table. It's providing that perspective, providing that wisdom that then when these things happen in life and life is just lifing, because that's what it's going to do, we can be a little bit more flexible. We can be a little bit more in acceptance of what happens. And that's when we get to separate the pain from the actual situation and the suffering that our mind is creating out of that situation.
Mhm.
And just separating that is, I think it's the beauty that Buddhism brings and the solution that Buddhism brings to human beings who are having these experiences of life and death and health and illnesses. So that's the beauty of it. And speaking about this attachment to identity, I'm really curious about this concept because this was one of the things that in the beginning, when I started learning, I was like, what is this? I really had a difficult time to understand the concept of ego death. Can you
Mhm.
explain a little bit more what that means? And I'm curious if you had that experience of feeling like your ego was dying, but what is it really? Because I know it's a concept that can be hard to grasp in the beginning.
It's actually very subtle and difficult. And there is a point also, it is subjective because it also depends on the relationship we have with our ego. Because if we're used to one relationship with our own identity, our own ego, and then it changes, whatever experience, like some people use mushrooms, some people use substances, some people through meditation, some people have spiritual awakenings, so many ways. Let's say we're conditioned because it's a conditioning that we have built, supported by society, by our family. It's a conditioning, and then we're used to a certain way for things to happen and go its way, and then maybe it changes suddenly and we can see from outside. Then we think, oh, my ego died. Wow, this is just a all letting go of all layers of what ego, this is my ego. But does it really mean that's ego death? This is where I think it's subjective. That
Mm.
there is, according to Buddhism, there are some standards, let's say, but what people normally say about ego death, I think it's related a lot to the subjective experience of seeing what one think what one was like, of the concept of the getting outside of the notion of the construction of I've made of myself, and seeing that from outside. Then we think, oh, that's my ego, that's that construction is my ego. But according to Buddhism, that which is seeing is also ego as well. It's just a
Hmm.
subtler layer of ego, because still there is the notion, oh, I am this, witnessing this. I am the person who is experiencing this. So, so it depends on that. In a way, the teaching of the Buddha or the practice of, yeah, let's talk about the teachings of the Buddha in this particular case. It really leads to disengage with the way we understand what reality is and what we are, and to see that from different perspectives. Somehow, some people like to compare it to watching a movie at the cinema. You're there, it's projecting on the screen, but you're not involved. If the character dies, you're not dying. You're just observing everything that is happening. Let's say, but you're not involved. You know you're not the character. You know you're not the movie. In a way, some meditation practices lead to that, to get to understand all the contents of the mind, reality itself. Because in a way, reality is a projection of the mind. We, the way we think, we see reality. If we are grumpy, if we are always in a bad mood, the whole world is horrible. So it also taints reality. So by seeing in different ways, we start to see that there is no core substance, that is not I am exactly this. Because when you're seeing from this particular point of view, you are this. But if you see from another point of view, then you realize it doesn't apply the same thing. So what is really happening there? And this is a way of letting go of all these personalities as well. Of course, there are things, there are traits, there are conditionings that come from for so many years since childhood, which is very difficult to see and to change. But there are many things we add as we live, and we start to see that they doesn't necessarily need to be with us, that they can change any moment we decide. The thing is, like, we are attached to these things, and we perpetuate them through actions, giving them strength by thinking of them, and then through action we keep them alive. But once we understand that that's not necessary, that we can change if we want, then we stop feeding this thing, and then it starts to change. So when you start to experience this from different points of view, you start to realize the personality is something more complex than we thought. Because it's not like we're like chiseled in stone and I am like this and I will be like this for the rest of my life. No, it's changing, but we have to put the effort. I mean, sometimes it's like crisis or situations make us change, right? And we are forced to change. But also, it doesn't need to happen in that way. We can also mold the mind in different ways, and to understand that there is no fixed thing that we can call this is my core personality.
Mm.
And I think this is important because it really helps us to see from outside everything that's happening, just observers of everything, and understanding that thoughts, because we take thoughts for reality. We think that what we think it's true. This is the normal conception of humans. Like we think that all the contents in our mind are true. This is reality. If I think this, it has to be true. And then we start to disengage from this and we start to understand that thoughts are just thoughts. It's phenomena that is occurring in the mind. It has its own reason, it has its own conditions to arise, to stay, to perish, but it's just mental processes. And as we disengage with this, we start to gain so much clarity because we're not entangled in all the contents of the mind. So coming back to ego, death, this is letting go of so many layers of ego, all the construction, and start to understand the things the way they're happening in the mind. And so in a way, this is letting go of many egos. As you entered monastic life, I was a chef, I was this, I was that. Now I'm just a monk. It doesn't matter where I come from, it doesn't matter how I look. I just let go of that ego, that personality, that construction I built for over, let's say, 20 years. I'm not longer this person. So this is, in a way, this is a way I understand in common terms ego death. Just letting go, peeling all those superficial layers and getting to see what's really happening in a more equanimous, non-attached way. Just understanding what's happening as phenomena that is occurring. It's not me, it's not mine. These thoughts are not me, are not mine. These are just thoughts. And when we don't engage with these thoughts, they just go. The problem comes when we engage with them and start to feed them. We see something we don't like and we start to think over and over and over about it, how to avoid it, how to do this, how to cause harm if we really dislike it. And we get so engaged. But when we just, that we perpetrate this feeling, this suffering, but we just disengage and we just, oh, it's anger, and just let it go. It just vanishes. So this is a way of peeling layers of ego.
So beautiful. And as I hear you speak, I have again this sense of freedom, freedom even from the stories that we tell ourselves about
Mhm,
ourselves, freedom from our own identity, freedom from the things that maybe we don't like so much about ourselves, freedom from the things that make us suffer.
mhm,
And we're free from them. It's not
mhm,
easy. It's not an easy process, but we can look at them and we can say, you're not coming with me anymore. I'm going to
mhm,
move on. And this identity, this label that I've attached for so long,
mhm,
is just not coming with me on the journey anymore. And we can choose if we want new ways of being without necessarily being attached to those now, but we can choose new ways of being and have a deep
mhm,
sense of freedom, even within the
mhm.
deepest parts of what we think, we are. So we've touched on many and really deep topics, but now I'm curious about your own lessons, what you
Mhm.
learned, what were those moments of light bulb when something deeply clicked? What were the biggest lessons that you gained through meditation and through the monastic life?
Okay, as I said initially, one of the first things that I experienced that was life changing was peace born out of insight. It was a very simple meditation. It was just observing the breath, in breath, out breath, nothing else. But it's very difficult because the mind keeps going here and there, wandering, just going to the past, projecting to the future, sounds, all sorts of ideas, everything. So it was frustrating. It was just, I was just 2 or 3 days there and it was just, oh my goodness, when is this going to stop? But at some point during that meditation, the mind calmed down and I could just observe the breath, nothing but the breath. Maybe it was seconds. I don't remember how long, but it was so profound because when I was just observing the breath, there were no thoughts, no wonder in mind. I felt so much peace. This is what I have been looking for my whole life. And it was just right here.
Mm.
It was just here. So it was profoundly changing because it led me to follow this path, which I've been walking for over 13 years now. This is one of the first things, this joy and clarity that come out of meditation, this peace, this home, this safe place inside us that is always there. We just need to learn how to access it. This is one thing. And another thing that I think it was very remarkable on this path was what I just explained. Understanding the mind and understanding, maybe not fully yet, but to a larger degree, that thoughts are just thoughts. They are not reality. They are not me. They are not mine. They are just thoughts. And don't get engaged. Don't get entangled with these thoughts. And it was also very profound because it just removes so many layers of suffering in life. Because we're so attached, we're so confused because we think that everything we think it's true. Sometimes we don't know what to do. Sometimes we so many things going to the past, going to the future, projecting here, projecting there. So a lot of confusion. So when we start to see that thoughts are just thoughts, we say, okay, there is confusion. Maybe just go meditate, let it calm down, and that's it. I'm angry. Okay, I just retreat, just find a space where I can be at ease, maybe breathe deeply, relax, and just let this anger go and not getting attached to it. So it was very profound because it really changes your view of life. It changes life, everything, reality changes. It's a change of paradigm because everything is different now. You understand that the mind and its thoughts are not necessarily reality, and it also shows you what you're cultivating, what type of thoughts you're cultivating, because we can decide what type of thoughts we want to cultivate in our mind. So it takes us from a passive role, like, oh, this is life, this is my mind, this is how it is, this is who I am, there's nothing
You
I can do,
you made me
and
feel that way.
exactly, and try to find my way among all these things to a more active role. It's like, okay, the mind is like a garden. What am I planting? What are the things I'm cultivating? What are the things I want to grow in this garden? What are the things I want in my life? What are the things I don't want in my life? What are the things that cause me harm, cause harm to others? And how can I just remove them gradually? And how can I bring other things that are more beneficial for me and for others? So it takes you from that point of view, he caused me pain, to why am I suffering? What did I do also to get into this situation, this painful situation? Because sometimes we are also actively involved in a situation that causes us
Mm,
pain. And sometimes we don't see that and we just see you just fault finding, oh no, it's your fault because you said this to me and that. But we don't see our role. We don't step back and say, okay, I was also mean.
mm,
My intention sometimes was not pure, and I was really trying to pick this person, trying to say mean things, being passive aggressive, this and that, and we don't realize this. And then we just, when something big happens, then we, oh no, it's this person's fault. So we start to see, also become much more aware of these subtle things that are
mm,
happening in our relationships with people. I'm being mean. Why am I being mean? Why did I say this?
mm,
What was the motivation behind this? That was not good. And sometimes it comes even to the point that we see a person we've never met, we have never spoken to, and we don't like it. We don't like this person for no reason. And the
mm,
mind starts to create reasons. Ah, the way he walks, oh, the way he chews, the way he or she does this. But when we're practicing, we become so much more aware of these things and we understand this is just a creation of the mind. The mind is
mm,
taking things from the other person and just building a concept, building an identity. Because
mm,
we don't only build identities for ourselves, but we also build identities for others. This person is like this, it's like that, but it's just our projections. And generally, these projections are based on our mental roots. There is greed, non-greed. There is aversion, non-aversion. So as we deepen in the practice, we become more aware of this, and we can tackle this issue. For example, telling the person, I have some sort of animosity against you, but I don't know why it's arising. And the moment we do that, it's just like we become vulnerable and we let go of all these things. And then we let the person also, we give the person the opportunity to express and so we can understand the person. Oh, it's not the way I was thinking this person was.
so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. We could just speak for hours because the depth of, the teachings of Buddhism and the depths of the experience that you've had. Is just so. Thank you so much, Juan, for your presence, your wisdom, everything that you have shared with us today with so much generosity. I'm sure we could be here for another 2 or 3 hours talking about many things, everything between life and death, everything in between. With a cup of coffee. Thank you so much again for your time, your wisdom, and your generosity. I want to thank also Shayla, who introduced us. She will probably listen to this episode, so huge gratitude to her as well for connecting us. Thank you so much to everybody for being here. I hope you found this episode insightful. You might want to listen to it again, take your time. Some of the concepts that we're going into are very, very deep. If you have any questions, you can always contact me. You can contact Juan. Thank you so much for being part of this episode today. I will see you on the next episode. And in the meantime, in Blisstopia we trust.